Officer Holden Price thought it would be a peaceful shift inside Harborview Galleria. Just warm lights, weekend shoppers, and a chance to breathe after weeks of long nights. But then a little girl in a mustard yellow coat lifted her trembling hand, not to wave, not to ask a question, but to give a silent rescue signal. No one noticed. No one understood. No one realized the man gripping her wrist wasn't her uncle. But Holden's canine partner, Coda, did. The German Shepherd froze mid-stride, ears snapping forward, amber eyes locked on the girl as a low growl rose in his chest. Holden tried to steady him, confused, until the child raised her hand again, desperation shaking through her tiny fingers. And in that moment, the calm mall shattered. What did Coda sense? What danger was this brave little girl silently begging to escape? Stay with us, because what happened next would turn a quiet, rainy afternoon into a rescue no one would ever forget. A thin autumn drizzle drifted across the Harborview coastline, softening the air with the faint scent of salt rising from the gray, restless bay. Inside Harborview Galleria, the afternoon felt deceptively gentle. Warm lights glowed above polished floors. Shoppers wandered with the slow rhythm of a lazy weekend, and the echo of distant music blended with the soft murmur of casual conversation. To anyone passing through, it looked like a safe haven from the wet world outside. But for Officer Holden Price, the tranquility was only a thin surface stretched over something heavier. Holden, 37, moved with the deliberate calm of a man who had learned to hide his exhaustion so well it nearly became part of his posture. Tall and lean, almost wiry, he carried the angular face of someone shaped by long nights, high cheekbones, a sharply defined jaw shaded by uneven stubble, and tired blue-gray eyes that seemed to hold the memory of every mistake he still hadn't forgiven himself for. Those eyes had once been brighter before a collapsed balcony during a rescue 2 years earlier took the life of a boy he could not save. People told him it wasn't his fault, but guilt had settled inside him like a tenant unwilling to leave, reflected now in the softened stoop of his shoulders. At his side moved Coda, a 4-year-old German Shepherd with a thick sable coat, still damp from the rain outside. Strength shaped the dog's every line, broad shoulders, balanced posture, and a tail that swept low with disciplined composure. Coda's amber eyes carried an uncanny sharpness, the gaze of a creature who noticed things long before humans did. Among the department he was known as the one who senses what others overlook. On days like this, Holden depended on that sensitivity more than he ever admitted aloud. The mall's management had invited them to create a sense of safety, allowing families to greet a police dog, to ask questions, to feel protected within the warm lights of the building. Holden, craving a quiet shift, accepted immediately. He imagined himself answering the harmless curiosities of children, nodding politely at parents, maybe even slipping away for a too-sweet mocha at the cafe near the north entrance. A harmless afternoon, a break from harder days. But as they walked past a row of boutiques, scented with cinnamon candles and leather handbags, Holden felt a faint tug on the leash. A tension so subtle it might have been overlooked by anyone else, except he knew Coda too well. The dog's breathing shifted to a slow, deliberate rhythm. His ears twitched toward the mezzanine level, his head angled just slightly to the right, as though tracking something distant, something invisible. Holden straightened, senses sharpening. "Coda, talk to me," he murmured, though he knew the dog answered through posture, not sound. A mall security guard, Marcus Bell, approached from the left. Marcus, in his late 40s, had the gentle presence of someone who had spent years mediating trivial arguments between teenagers. Shorter, round around the middle, with a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard and warm brown eyes, he wore friendliness, like a uniform. "Everything smooth on your side?" Marcus asked, smiling at Coda. "He looks dialed in." Holden forced a thin smile. "He probably smells pretzels." Marcus chuckled, adjusted the radio on his shoulder, and continued toward the food court. Holden's smile faded instantly. Coda did not tense up over pretzels. The dog lifted his nose, sampling the air with short, decisive breaths. Something flickered behind his eyes, curiosity shifting toward tension, instinct sharpening into warning. Holden followed Coda's gaze. The hallway ahead was deceptively normal. A teenage boy examining shoes in a store window, a couple holding hands near the escalator, a mother pushing a stroller while gently rocking her baby. Nothing threatening, nothing unusual, and yet Holden felt it, a subtle pressure under his ribs, an invisible tremor in the quiet. The same sensation he used to feel seconds before a search and rescue call turned dangerous. Coda's tail lowered another fraction, his stance aligned into the unmistakable posture of focus, muscles ready, eyes fixed, breath leveled. Then came the sound Holden feared most from him, a short, controlled huff, a signal, a warning, something was wrong, or about to be. The drizzle outside intensified, tapping harder against the skylights. The faint sound echoed across the polished mall floors like distant static. And in that moment, before Holden saw anything, before he understood the source of Coda's unease, he felt the shift. The fragile calm of Harborview Galleria was beginning to crack. Something was coming. Something Coda had sensed first. The soft thrum of rain against the skylights continued like a distant, steady drumbeat as Holden Price followed Coda through the widening corridor on the second floor. The air inside the mall carried the mingled scents of popcorn, warm pretzels, new books, and wet jackets. But beneath it all lingered something sharper, something that curled in Coda's nose like a truth trying to surface. Holden moved with cautious steps, watching the subtle but unmistakable shift in his partner's body, the low carriage of the tail, the narrow fix of the eyes, the breath grown slow and purposeful. He had seen Coda behave like this before, not in calm malls, but in shattered buildings after storms, in wooded ravines where missing children hid behind fear, in places where danger hid behind ordinary sounds. At the far end of the hall, just past the children's bookstore, Bram Keller walked with a stiffness that contradicted his attempt at appearing relaxed. Bram was in his early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with hard, blocky features carved by a life that seemed to lean toward confrontation rather than cooperation. His skin was weathered, slightly rough, the kind of tone found on men who spent more time on the streets than in offices. Black ink stretched across both his arms, sprawling tattoos of flames, broken chains, barbed thorns, marks that suggested an unresolved past more than artistry. He wore a black rain-dampened jacket, frayed at the collar, dark jeans that clung to heavy strides, and old sneakers that had lost their bounce long ago. His expression held a forced casualness, yet his eyes kept shifting. Rapid flicks to the corners, the ceilings, the reflective storefronts. Eyes always searching, eyes that feared being seen. In his firm grip was the small hand of Elodie Marsh, an 8-year-old girl wrapped in a mustard-yellow coat that seemed a size too big for her slight frame. Elodie had wavy brown hair clipped neatly at the sides. Those strands had loosened around her face, sticking to the light sheen of nervous sweat on her temple. Her skin was pale, almost sallow under the fluorescent lights, and she clutched a worn stuffed bunny by its ear, a bunny whose seams had been repaired more than once. She walked quietly, shoulders curved inward, each step too small, too careful, like she feared the sound of her own footsteps. Children her age usually pulled adults toward sweets or toys, but Elodie's gaze pinned itself to the floor, as though looking up would expose her. Coda caught her scent before Holden caught sight of her. He inhaled the layers, cotton, dust, a faint sweetness of berry shampoo, and buried beneath it a raw note, fear, thin but piercing. The dog's ears twitched, his body lowered slightly, but not in aggression. This was focus, steady and calculating. Holden followed the invisible thread Coda traced until he saw them, the man and the girl. Holden slowed. Something about their pace, the tension in the girl's small, Shoulders, the too tight grip of the man's hand, it nudged at him in the way Coda's earlier huff had. "Easy," he murmured to the dog, but the truth was he was speaking to himself. Elodie's eyes flickered up briefly. She scanned the passing adults, each face indifferent. No one noticed her trembling fingers, the little tremor in her breath. She cast a glance behind, once, twice, then her gaze locked on Coda. The world seemed to narrow for her then. The noise of the mall shrank until all she heard was her heartbeat. Coda's amber eyes held hers. There was no judgment in them, no confusion, only recognition, steady and strangely comforting. Elodie had been taught about signs, signals children could use when danger sat too close for words. She never thought she would have to use them, but facing Coda's unwavering stare, she felt the first flicker of hope. Holden, meanwhile, approached slowly. As he walked, his eyes caught fleeting details about the people around him: an elderly man wiping his glasses near a display of novels, a teenage girl adjusting her earbuds near the escalator, a young father carrying a shopping bag of toys. Innocent bystanders. Everything looked deceptively normal, which only sharpened Holden's unease. He noticed someone else too. Cynthia Moreland, a clerk from the children's bookstore. Cynthia was in her early 50s, short and slightly hunched from years of bending over low shelves. Her thinning copper-colored hair was twisted into a loose bun, strands escaping like little wisps of smoke. She wore a patterned blue cardigan, and rectangular glasses perched at the tip of her nose. Cynthia had a gentle face, lined from smiling more often than frowning, and she watched the pair with mild concern, just enough to notice something odd, but not enough to understand it. Bram pretended to examine a children's atlas, though his eyes darted sideways when he realized Holden and Coda were approaching. His jaw tightened. He shifted his grip on Elodie, pulling her half a step closer, a motion almost imperceptible except for how Elodie's shoulders lifted in silent tension. Coda paused, nose lifting sharply. Holden felt the leash tighten. "Coda," he warned again, though his voice lost its earlier softness. Elodie took a shaky breath, glancing desperately up at the dog. She felt Bram's hand tighten around her wrist, hard enough to sting. She looked again at the German shepherd, whose gaze seemed to reach inside her, urging her to act. She raised her free hand just a little, a small gesture, a trembling one, not fully formed yet, but enough for Coda to understand. He responded first, a low, quiet rumble that vibrated through Holden's hand like a pulse. Holden felt every muscle in his body tense. His mind raced through possibilities: a lost child, a medical emergency, a family dispute. But the way Coda moved, forward, purposeful, unwavering, told him this was something else. Coda stepped toward Bram and Elodie, slow and steady, not lunging, not barking, just closing the distance, a guardian drawn by instinct. Bram stiffened, forcing a thin smile as Holden reached conversational distance. "Afternoon," Holden offered, keeping his tone smooth, neutral. He had learned long ago that calm voices often uncovered truths faster than sharp ones. "Hey there, officer," Bram replied. His voice was deep, threaded with a roughness that suggested long nights and cigarettes. There was a twitch under one eye, subtle but telling. "Just shopping with my niece." Elodie's fingers curled tighter around her stuffed bunny. Holden's eyes flicked to her. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Elodie looked at him, just for a second, and then at Coda. And in that quiet exchange, something passed between the three of them: her plea, the dog's certainty, and the officer's dawning realization. Coda stepped again, a single decisive movement, his body angled protectively, interposing himself ever so slightly between Elodie and Bram. Holden drew in a slow breath, pulse quickening. He didn't know the full story yet, but he knew this moment, this breath, this tension, this silence, was the moment every instinct began to align, and the storm that had been building beneath the surface was now preparing to break. The rain drummed harder against the glass ceiling above the second floor, its rhythm steady but growing in force, as if the storm itself sensed the tension building beneath it. The mall's warm lighting flickered slightly in reflection over the glossy tile as Holden Price approached the children's bookstore aisle, following the deliberate sharpening movements of Coda. The air felt heavier now, humid, metallic, charged, carrying the faint scent of wet coats, paper, and the quiet dread Coda had already detected long before Holden understood it. Bram Keller stood rigid near the display shelf, his posture a strained imitation of nonchalance. The black jacket clung to his bulky frame, dampened by the earlier rain, and the faint gleam of tattoo ink along his wrists pulsed as his fingers tightened around Elodie Marsh's small wrist. Bram's jaw flexed, a sharp, twitching movement under stubble that had grown unevenly across his chin. His eyes, dark and restless, flickered the way a cornered animal's might, darting between Holden, the dog, and the nearest exit, calculating what he did not yet dare attempt. Elodie stood slightly behind him, the mustard yellow coat swallowing her small frame. Her brown hair framed her face in soft curls, dampened by the humidity. Her breathing trembled. Her knuckles were pale where she gripped the stuffed bunny that had once comforted her but now felt more like a lifeline. She tried to look calm, but the tiny shivers in her fingers betrayed her. When Bram leaned down and hissed his warning, no talking, no signals, no eye contact. Her shoulders tightened like a reflex born from repeated threats. Holden only saw the surface of this scene at first. A man and a child near a shelf of illustrated books, a quiet moment in an otherwise normal rainy afternoon at the mall. But Coda saw deeper. The German shepherd stepped forward with controlled precision, ears pricked, pupils narrowing as he locked onto the shape of Elodie's small raised hand. Her fingers curled inward, thumb folding into her palm, a gesture full of trembling intent, the silent safety signal. Coda growled low, a rumble that vibrated through the leash. Holden felt the tension before he understood it. "Coda," he whispered, though the dog didn't look back. The shepherd's muscles were taut, his breathing steady and fierce. Holden had seen Coda's intuition sharpen like this only in moments where danger lived in the smallest details. Bram reacted first, forcing Elodie's hand down so abruptly she staggered. He pasted on a smile so forced it looked painful, baring teeth that did nothing to soften the threat lurking in his posture. "Everything all right, officer?" he asked, voice stiff, rising half an octave despite his attempt at casual charm. Holden approached with measured calm, his hand hovering near his duty belt, but not yet touching it. "Just checking in," he replied. "Busy day?" Elodie stared at Holden, then at Coda, the silent cry trembling behind her eyes so clear that it tightened Holden's chest. She didn't speak. She didn't dare. But children didn't need words for their fear to be readable. Coda moved again, leaning his weight subtly forward, inching into Bram's space with the protective instinct of a creature who had decided the truth before any adult voice confirmed it. The surrounding shoppers began to sense something shifting. A young mother pushing a stroller slowed her pace. A teenage boy browsing graphic novels paused mid-page. Near the store entrance, a man in a brown coat, perhaps in his 60s with silver hair brushed neatly back, glanced over with casual concern. His name, as Holden would later learn, was Ernest Dallinger, a retired history teacher who visited the bookstore each Thursday. Ernest was tall and stooped slightly from years at chalkboards. His mild blue eyes were gentle, but sharp enough to notice tension. He wasn't a central figure in what followed, but his watching presence added weight to the moment, another witness drawn into an unfolding truth. Holden addressed the girl gently. "You two out doing some shopping today?" Elodie's lips parted. A breath trembled there, but fear kept her silent. Her gaze flicked to Bram's knuckles wrapped too tightly around her wrist. Before she could decide whether to speak, Bram cut in. "She's shy," he said, voice cracking just enough to betray him. "She doesn't," Coda barked. One sharp explosion of sound aimed like a warning flare. A few people jumped. Ernest flinched. The mother with the stroller pulled her baby closer, and even Bram's composure fractured for a split second. Holden stepped forward, the calm in his voice thinning. "Sir, I'm going to need to ask—" But he didn't finish, because Elodie raised her hand again, a little higher, a little clearer, her fingers curled in the unmistakable plea children were taught to use only in the most desperate moments. This time she wasn't just trembling, she was begging, and Coda answered instantly. He lunged half a step, planting himself squarely between the girl and Bram, his hackles lifted, breath steady, eyes blazing with protective intensity. Bram jerked back as if struck by the force of Coda's presence alone. "Hey, control your dog!" Bram snapped, but the quiver in his voice betrayed the fear beneath the anger. Holden's pulse quickened. The slow unraveling of doubt inside him finally tore. He saw it now, the girl's fear, the man's control, the tension that didn't belong in any normal pair. "Elodie," Holden spoke softly, deliberately using her name, though she had not told it to him. "Are you all right?" Bram stiffened, his grip tightened like a trap on the girl's wrist. Elodie winced. A breath cracked in her throat. The retired teacher Ernest took a hesitant step closer, brows knitting. The mother with the stroller backed away more quickly now, sensing danger and wanting no part in it. Another passer-by, a tall, athletic woman in running clothes with a crimson ponytail swaying behind her, slowed her steps, eyes narrowing as she assessed the tension. Her name was Haley Trent, a former track runner turned fitness instructor who had always been quick to read body language after surviving an abusive relationship in her 20s. She didn't know these people, but she knew fear. It rang through Elodie's posture like a bell. Holden swallowed, voice lowering. "Sir, let go of the girl." Bram's smile fell apart. His eyes sharpened into something wild. He tugged Elodie closer, too close, and the storm that had been building, the one Coda sensed long before anyone else, finally cracked open inside that narrow aisle of books. The sound of the storm outside deepened, each raindrop hammering the skylights with gathering urgency, as the air in the corridor thickened with a tension so sharp it seemed to vibrate through the polished tiles. Holden Price felt the moment snap, the thin line between suspicion and certainty breaking apart, when Elodie Marsh, her small voice fractured with terror, whispered the truth that shattered Bram Keller's feigned composure. "He's not my uncle. Please don't let him take me." The words were soft, barely more than breath, but they carried enough weight to freeze every person within earshot. The mother with the stroller gasped quietly and pulled her child closer. Ernest Dallinger, the retired teacher who had paused near a shelf of biographies, straightened so sharply he winced at the pull on his lower back. Even Haley Trent, the athletic young woman in running gear, tensed as though her own muscles remembered a past she once escaped. Holden's breath hitched, processing shock, anger, urgency, all at once. But Coda reacted with none of the hesitation of humans. The German shepherd's body surged forward in a powerful shift of weight, hackles rising like bristled warning flags, teeth bared but not in attack, only in a declaration of protection. Bram saw Coda's movement and it jolted him into action. His face drained of color, his jaw clenched as pure instinct overtook whatever plan he had rehearsed. He yanked Elodie toward him, gripping her so tightly the girl gasped. Then he bolted. His shoes squealed against the tile as he dragged her toward the stairwell leading down to the parking garage. Holden shouted, "Stop!" Even though he knew Bram wouldn't, he launched forward, but Coda was faster. The leash slipped from Holden's fingers as the dog exploded into motion, 4 legs pounding the slick floor with ferocious speed, claws clicking like frantic drumbeats. The sudden commotion startled bystanders. A middle-aged man carrying a coffee stumbled out of the way, spilling the drink over his khaki pants. A young store clerk with bleached hair, later introduced as Tyler Wynn, a timid 19-year-old with a narrow face and anxious posture, pressed himself against the wall, wide-eyed at the unfolding chaos. Bram dragged Elodie across the floor with cruel desperation. The girl's shoes scraped against the tile, her cries muffled by the storm pounding above. Holden's heart hammered as he sprinted after them, dodging shoppers and ignoring the ache that flared in his calves. He'd run through burning buildings and collapsing stairs before. He would run through this mall with the same determination. As Bram reached the wide glass corridor leading to the exit, the rain beyond the windows blurred the world into streaks of silver and gray. Outside, the wind was rising, carrying sheets of water across the pavement. The automatic door sensors flickered under the erratic weather, opening a second too slow as Bram tried to force his way there. He veered right instead toward a narrower hallway leading to a maintenance door, but Coda moved with calculating precision. Instead of chasing Bram in a straight line, the shepherd angled his run diagonally, paws sliding briefly on a slick patch of tile. He recovered instantly, pushing his weight into a controlled skid that cut Bram off from the side corridor just as the man attempted to turn. Bram cursed, jerking back. The sudden movement made Elodie stumble. She tripped over the corner of a floor mat and fell sideways. Straight toward the path Holden was racing down. Holden lunged. His hands caught her under her arms before she hit the floor, pulling her into his chest. She trembled violently, her breath coming in tiny, panicked gasps. "I've got you," Holden said, voice low but firm, though the adrenaline in his veins buzzed like electricity. Bram, off balance from the failed turn, slipped on the thin film of rainwater that had been tracked inside. His feet flew forward, his back slammed against the ground with a thud that echoed across the corridor. Tyler Wynne, the young clerk, flinched at the sound, covering his mouth in shock. Haley Trent took 2 steps forward as if her instincts screamed to help, but Holden shook his head sharply. "Stay back!" Bram tried to scramble upright, but Coda was already standing between him and the girl, teeth bared, chest rising and falling in steady, controlled breaths. The thunderous growl vibrating through the dog's frame sounded like distant storm clouds threatening to break open. Holden lifted his radio with one hand while holding Elodie with the other. His voice cut through the tension, steady, commanding, each word carrying years of experience. "Dispatch, this is Officer Price. Child abduction suspect in custody location. Harborview Galleria, 2nd floor, south wing. Request immediate backup." The reply crackled through the static, almost drowned out by the pounding rain. "Copy that. Units en route." Within moments, the piercing wail of sirens began to rise outside, muffled but growing louder, blending with the storm's ferocity. Holden set Elodie gently behind him, hand still protective on her shoulder. She clung to his jacket, her small fingers trembling so hard he felt each shiver through the fabric. Coda's growl deepened as Bram made a futile attempt to crawl backward. The man lifted his hands slightly, palms slick with sweat and rainwater, but his eyes darted wildly in every direction, seeking a path he no longer had. Then backup arrived. The first officer to reach them was Dana Corbett, a woman in her mid-40s with a square jaw softened by faint smile lines. Her ash-blonde hair was cut in a neat shoulder-length bob, rainwater still clinging to it from the sprint across the parking lot. Dana had a sturdy build, years of patrol work giving her the kind of steady presence that could calm crowds or subdue threats with equal efficiency. She approached Bram briskly, eyes narrowed with professional focus. "Don't move," she ordered. Another officer, a tall, lanky man named Reggie Solano, with tan skin, a shaved head, and the kind of easy-going personality that often masked razor-sharp instincts, moved in to secure Bram's arms. His long fingers were precise as he snapped the cuffs around Bram's wrists. "Well, well," Reggie muttered, voice tinged with controlled disdain. "Your day just went downhill, didn't it?" Bram hissed through his teeth, but didn't speak. His earlier bravado had drained away, leaving a hollow anger behind. Dana searched his jacket efficiently, pulling free a folded map marked with travel routes, a child's purple hair tie, and small trinkets that clearly didn't belong to him. Holden felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He had done this before. Elodie leapt toward Coda then, wrapping her arms around the shepherd's neck as tears streamed silently down her cheeks. Coda lowered his head, letting her cling to him, his growl finally fading into a soft rumble, not warning now, but comfort. The storm outside raged on, but inside the mall, a different storm had just been stopped, and the child who might have vanished forever now trembled in the arms of the dog who refused to let her be taken. The storm outside thickened into a curtain of silver, the rain now slanting hard across the parking lot as police lights pulsed red and blue against the wet pavement. The automatic doors of Harborview Galleria slid open again with a sigh of cold air, and through that doorway burst a woman soaked in rain, hair clinging to her cheeks, breath coming in uneven gasps. Lorraine Marsh, Elodie's mother, moved with the frantic speed of someone who had been running long before her feet reached the mall, driven not by muscles but by terror and hope warring in her chest. Lorraine was in her mid-30s, slender, almost delicate in frame, with warm brown skin and soft features normally gentle but now twisted tight with fear. Her dark brown hair, usually tied into a neat low bun for her job as a dental receptionist, had come undone in the rain, strands curling wildly around her face. She wore a burgundy raincoat, though its color was dulled by the storm water clinging to it. Her shoes splashed loudly as she ran across the tile. Her eyes, wide, frantic, raw, searched desperately for the only person that mattered. "Lottie?" she cried, the single word cracking open as though pulled from a part of her she'd been holding together with sheer will. Elodie Marsh, standing near Holden and Coda, turned at the sound. Her red-rimmed eyes widened, her breath caught, and the stuffed bunny nearly slipped from her grasp. "Mom!" she sobbed, voice breaking free like a dam bursting. She sprinted, small boots slapping the floor, and Lorraine dropped to her knees just in time for Elodie to crash into her arms. The mother wrapped her daughter so tightly it seemed she feared the storm might still reach in and tear the child away. Elodie clung back with equal desperation, her small fists gripping Lorraine's rain-soaked coat, burying her face against her mother's chest as sobs shook her shoulders. Lorraine's tears mingled with the rain still dripping from her hair. She whispered Elodie's name over and over, each repetition a mix of apology, relief, and disbelief. I thought I'd lost you. I thought you were gone." Her words trembled, broken between breaths, as though her body couldn't decide whether to cry or collapse. Holden stood a few feet away, breathing deeply as the adrenaline began to ebb. His uniform clung to him with the residual dampness of the chase, and his hair, usually combed with an absent-minded neatness, now stuck slightly to his forehead. He watched the mother and daughter with a haunting familiarity, memories of families reunited, others torn apart, all knotting into something heavy behind his stern expression. But the weight eased as he saw Elodie safe. Lorraine lifted her head after a long moment, eyes still wet, and looked toward Holden. Her stare held gratitude so intense it bordered on disbelief. Then her gaze shifted downward to Coda. The German shepherd had calmed, his stance relaxed now that the threat was gone. His coat still carried droplets of rain and a faint sheen of sweat from exertion. His eyes, sharp and amber, softened as they followed Elodie's movements. The dog stood perfectly still, ears tilted forward, tail hanging in a loose, quiet curve. He remained alert enough to guard, but gentle enough not to frighten, a rare balance only a dog forged in rescue work could hold. Lorraine's voice shook as she spoke. "Thank you. I don't know how to ever repay—" But her sentence trailed off, choked by emotion. Holden shook his head gently. "You don't need to repay anything. She's safe. That's enough." Elodie wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, then turned to look at Coda with the trembling reverence of someone seeing her protector clearly for the first time. The fear had not fully drained from her small body. Her hands still quivered, and her breaths came in uneven bursts. But when she looked at Coda, some tiny piece of her steadied. "Coda," Holden said softly, lowering his voice to a tone usually reserved for moments requiring both reassurance and respect. If she wants to come to you, let her. Right now, you're her dog. Elodie approached slowly, still holding her worn, stuffed bunny in one hand. Her other hand hovered uncertainly in the air, trembling as it neared Coda's head. The shepherd didn't move, didn't startle, didn't even blink too quickly. He simply lowered his head a fraction, offering himself. "You came for me," she whispered. It wasn't a question, it was a confession, a realization that the silent signal she feared might be ignored had been seen, understood, and answered by the one soul she least expected. Coda blinked once, slow and gentle, then leaned his head into her trembling palm. A tiny sob slipped from Elodie's lips as she dropped to her knees. She wrapped both arms, thin, shaking, desperate, around Coda's neck and pressed her face into his fur, letting the remaining fear melt into the warmth of the dog who had chased the nightmare away. Coda held still, calm, accepting, the soft rumble of a comforting breath vibrating in his chest. Rain pattered against the glass walls of the mall, a muted roar that wrapped the moment in an almost sacred stillness. No one clapped, no one cheered. The small crowd that had gathered watched in reverent silence, recognizing the weight of what had just unfolded. A child rescued not by dramatic heroics alone, but by a silent signal and a dog who listened. Two paramedics approached then, one a young blonde woman named Sarah Kelton, around 27, slender with bleached honey hair tied in a ponytail. The other a broad-shouldered man named Mateo Ruiz, mid-30s, bearded, with warm brown eyes, and a habit of speaking gently, even in emergencies. They stopped several feet away, exchanging a glance before Sarah said softly, "We'll give them a moment." When Lorraine finally rose, she held Elodie's hand but allowed her daughter to stay close to Coda's side. The three walked toward the ambulance waiting outside, the rain still pouring heavily, but no longer frightening. Elodie's fingers remained curled in Coda's fur, unwilling to let go, as if the dog's presence anchored her to the world again. "Can I see him again?" Elodie asked, voice soft, but filled with hope now instead of fear. Holden managed a rare, warm smile through his exhaustion. "He'd be very happy to see you again." Elodie crouched once more, hugging Coda tightly. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered into his fur. Coda breathed out a long, tired exhale, the sound of a warrior finally permitted to rest, and sat beside Holden, watching mother and daughter disappear through the glass doors into the rain. And in that moment, beneath the storm, echoing across the roof of Harborview Galleria, a story took root. A story not only of fear or danger, but of a silent plea, a brave child, and a German shepherd whose instinct to protect had been powerful enough to bring a lost girl home. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder, bright light, or angels descending from the sky. Sometimes they walk beside us on four steady paws, listen to a silent cry for help, and step forward exactly when a fragile life needs them most. In the quiet rain outside Harborview Galleria, a little girl was returned to her mother not only because of courage, not only because of training, but because something greater watched over them all. A whisper of grace, a protection that felt larger than instinct, a reminder that God often works through the smallest signals, a trembling hand, a brave child, and a loyal German shepherd who refused to look away. And perhaps that is the lesson for the rest of us. In our everyday routines, our grocery runs, our long shifts, our lonely drives home, we may never know whose silent prayer we are walking past. We may never know when we are the ones meant to see the signal, or meant to be the one who answers it. So hold kindness close, hold faith closer, because the world is full of small miracles, and sometimes we're allowed to witness one. If this story touched your heart, please let us know where you're watching from. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe, as we do, that God places protectors in our path, sometimes human, sometimes four-legged. Consider subscribing for more stories of courage, hope, and redemption. May God bless you. May He watch over your family, your children, and every quiet miracle waiting to find its way to you. Amen.